You may now proceed.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. So I have noticed some tendencies from the government over the last number of years while I've been working with these standing orders, and I am trying to dampen the government's enthusiasm for those tendencies, because I think ultimately they do not serve this Assembly well. And I know that it's an inconceivable thought to buy honourable members opposite in the government, but honestly, if they had to consider some of these standing orders and some of the proposed changes as having to work under them as opposition members, they wouldn't be quite so keen to have them passed. And I'm just looking out for all of your best possible, just for the best possible for you, in case you ever do end up in opposition. I will have made it a little less difficult if you will support me by passing my amendments. One of the tendencies that I have seen is an increase in the sitting times per day, but a steady decline in the number of days that we are actually here in the Assembly. And for those of you that are keeping track, fewer days in this Assembly is fewer question periods in this Assembly. So again, in trying to help the honourable members in the government be as transparent as they say they'd like to be, the more question periods that are provided to them, the better off they will be and the better off we will all be. So I'm trying to stop that tendency to shrink the number of sitting days in a session. The other tendency I've noticed is an increasing number of motions which the government puts forward and cannot be debated. So we've already had a couple of here already this afternoon. For example, the evening sittings, well, that's now worded in such a way that when the Government House Leader introduces a motion that we will have evening sittings, it goes to a vote without debate. So we're no longer able to talk about this, how it affects our families, how it affects our ability to do our work or anything else, because it's another motion that under the standing orders goes to a vote without debate. And I don't think that's the best thing for democracy. So one of the final points I wanted to make is although I appreciate, and I think it's helped all of us to have staff on the floor with us during the estimates debates, I have one hesitation, and I will call it, I can say the name of someone that used to be here, right? I will call it the Memorial Gary Marr concern. When Mr. Marr was a Minister of the Crown and I used to appear opposite him in public accounts, he was not keen on being there, I'll admit, but he would, we were kind of stuck because if he wasn't there to answer the question, nothing could happen because we weren't allowed to question his staff. That's moved a long way now, and we can now have staff on the floor to assist ministers. But what I don't want to see is the point where the minister disappears entirely, which our former colleague was wont to do, wander off to the back and get on his cell phone and indulge in whatever goodies were backstage there. So just my little request that we not end up with that kind of a situation happening in honour of that particular minister's behaviour in the past. Now, let me go to the amendment to to motion 24, which has been brought before us, and I'll go through the sections that I've got here and tell you why I've asked for this. So the first section, A, and forgive me with this because you've got to kind of follow along like one of those complicated agendas, but my sections A, B, C, D, and E are the sections in order to denote what I've done here. But then if you read on, Section 2 is actually what you will find on the outside of the standing orders as they appear in your order paper, okay? So Section 2 is amended in the proposed Standing Order 8, sub 2.1, by striking out provide notice to the clerk and substituting provide written notice to the clerk and all House leaders. And the reason I've done this is just to clarify. We stated earlier that we really didn't need to have the official opposition House leader standing up and asking the government to reel off into Hansard and just to stand there and do it, frankly, for the projected government business. Fair enough. But The way the amendment was written, the way Motion 24 was written to refer to this is that information would be provided to the clerk. And I just wanted to clarify that information would be provided to the House leaders so we can then work with our staff and our MLAs to make sure that we've got it soon enough. I didn't want to see a situation happen where information went to the clerk, it turns up in the order paper, but we don't get an early order paper, we see one Monday morning. Tough to schedule your colleagues when the first time you hear about the projected government business is Monday morning. So this was just an amendment to make sure that the House leaders would also get the written information and would get it on the Thursday that we're in here. So a small change, but an important one for opposition members. Section B is striking out Section 5 completely, and that is the section in our standing orders 57. Now, 57 is a long-held tradition of this Assembly, and it says, when the Assembly is in and sitting, no other committee may meet. And you think, well, what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal. We're all in here in the Assembly to do the work of our constituents. And it's difficult at times to do the work of our constituents if there's business going on in the Assembly and you are required to be sitting in a committee that is meeting somewhere else. So we've always had a rule, no other committees when the Assembly is sitting. And we've had occasions where we've done all-nighters and it comes around to Wednesday morning and it gets close to that 8:30 time when public accounts is going to start. Public accounts can't happen because the Assembly is still sitting. And neither should it happen, because we want the attention and the full attention of members to be on the Assembly when the Assembly trumps the committees, in other words. So what I don't want to see is a situation where the Assembly is meeting and we're sending people out of here and off to do work in committees. That is not a good idea as far as I'm concerned. It splits the focus of people, and frankly, we can't all do the good job that we came here to do on behalf of our constituents and on behalf of Albertans. So I have asked for that section to be struck out, and it's a section that is being amended to say that, sorry, let me get all three of these together. That the LPCs could meet at the same time. The legislative policy committees, which are doing our budget estimates, could meet at the same time as the Assembly is in. And there's a second point later on where it talks about if the business of the Assembly is still continuing. For example, if we went past the usual time because we had a point of privilege or standing 30 emergency debate, again, this would allow the LPCs to go off and start. And I just don't think that should be allowed. I don't think that's in all of our best interest. And interestingly enough, it also allows the government to continue to shorten the time that we sit. So aside from the conflict that is created and the lack of attention on the business of the House, it also manages to get two things done at the same time and shorten our total sitting time. Section 6, which is amending Section 6A in the government's Motion 24, and which in turn amends Standing Order 5901, is really about how we negotiate the schedule of the budget debates. And I wanted to make sure here that we didn't do something unfair to the committees, and that is just kind of dump on them, okay, you guys, go off and figure out the time schedule, because I've sat in enough of these committees where we all struggle with our electronic devices to even organize the next meeting of the committee. And most times it ends up being deferred to the clerk, who has to do some sort of a straw call-out, a poll call-out to all the members to find out when the members of the committee can get together for the next committee meeting. Oh my Lord, can you imagine having to try and organize a budget debate of all of the departments of the government, doing that in a committee? That's just not fair to do that to the people that are in that committee. So what I proposed was that the House leaders together would present a schedule in a certain timing to the LPCs. The LPCs would be able to pretty much review it and just make sure that we hadn't, gone astray for some reason, and that's not usually going to happen because you've got three opposition parties and the government, and if they can all agree, that's about as good as you're going to get. And we also, as House leaders, make sure that each of our caucuses adhere to the agreement that we've made. So we guarantee that everybody will pull along behind it. So that's what I've done here, is just adjust it a little bit to present it to the LPC. The LPC can review it, change it if they need to, and then if we can't agree, it goes to the LPC to do the best they can. And in the end, it all goes back to the government House leader, because it's about that time that some of our beloved ministers remember that, oh, indeed, they had been scheduled to be in Berlin. So, no, they couldn't do it that day, and could we please rearrange the whole schedule for them? So that then gets punted into the lap of the government House leader. And good luck to him. So that's what we're trying to do is, and thank you, by the way, for reducing the size of those committees. 25 people was just unworkable, and we're down to 18, I think, in most cases. So in 5901...
I neglected to give your amendment a name. So just for the record, we will call your amendment A1.
Thank you very much, and I would like to move acceptance by everyone in the Assembly of Amendment A1, which is an amendment to the government's Motion 24 as appearing in the order paper. Thank you so much. Just continuing on with the amendments that I have in front of you here. So the B is amending suborder 4, striking out suborder 3. That's really just a renumbering to make sure that the reference that appears in the next section is actually referring to the right thing now. Section C, suborder 5. Nope, wrong place. 559. Oh boy, this is complicated, and you can see why I would really feel bad about putting all of this in front of a committee. 5901 CC. Oh right. Oh. Okay, this is, how could I have missed this? I know that, I believe that we all work hard. I do. And no matter whether you're urban or rural, you're in the government or not, I think we work hard. What's interesting is that we have a better sense in the opposition sides of what the government's kind of schedule is and where your heavy load is. For some reason, the government just never quite clicks into the fact that for opposition members, morning is a heavy workload. That's when we get a lot of the stuff done that you see now. And so to propose that we would meet in these legislative policy committees to debate budgets from 8 a.m. to noon, and then from 3:30 to 6:30, and then from 7 to 10, aside from the fact that I'm sure there's child labour laws that don't allow that somewhere, not that we're children, but we can't do that. We just can't. And I didn't want it to sit in there. I mean, this is, your government House leader is a good man and would not abuse this, but I didn't want it to sit there in case it might be used by an evil twin in some years in the future. So I think we should just strike it out and not leave it lying about to be tumbled over by somebody in the future. Finally, the second part that I was talking about, where the legislative policy committees may commence consideration, notwithstanding that we're still sitting in the House. And the final bit turns up on Section 8, and that is about departments and ministries. Oh, it's the last piece following the... Oh. Okay, so if the minister calls this the Laurie Blakeman Memorial Amendment, because I wouldn't give him unanimous consent, this is not right. And the member knows it's not right, because we have a long-standing tradition in this Assembly that money bills get 4 days. First reading, second reading, committee of the whole, third reading. They get 4 days. And you cannot introduce an appropriation bill until you have voted on the estimates. And this ends up putting them together. No, 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 tisk, tisk, tisked. Because it is queue-jumping that. It is allowing, and once more, folks, if you're paying attention, cuts 1 more day off of the numbers that were here. And I know that those members present on the other side desperately need that additional day to be transparent in question period. and I'm helping them with that. And finally, in the last section, in Section 9, this is what I call the Laurie Blakeman Memorial Amendment, because I have always said that if we are looking at a supplementary supply in which is more than $1 billion that's being considered, or more than 8 ministries that are under examination, we should have more than 3 hours to do it. And so my final section in the amending motion is to make sure that if that is the case, we would have a minimum of 6 hours to debate Committee of Supply. Some of you happily have not been here when we've had to do that, but honestly, I have had supplementary supply budgets of well over $1 billion, and up to 14 ministries were being debated, and you've got 3 hours. I mean, nobody, even the chipmunk singing family, can talk fast enough and get questions out of government fast enough. So it does no one a service. So those are the amendments that I am proposing. I believe that they're all reasonable. I've kidded you a bit about some of the things I proposed. I do really support the government House Leader for the work that he's done here, but I am making those suggestions because I think it will result in the best rules for us all to agree to work by, to make it the most fair to members of the opposition. And a good opposition makes a good government. And there should be nothing over there. There's nothing in these amendments that should scare anybody over there. I'm not pulling any fast ones. It's all pretty easy to look at. And I would ask that you support me in this amendment to the Government House Leader's Motion 24. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your support.